Yeah, I just want to piggyback on a couple of things that Lafayette mentioned earlier. He talked about building your credit by using credit cards, and that's important. The most important thing he said actually was paying them off. So, the idea is you should use credit cards instead of cash, not instead of money. That's what a lot of people do is they put stuff on credit and don't pay it off. And then all of a sudden they found themselves, buried in the mountain of credit card debt. And then, wind up a lot of times having to get that written off, which negatively affects your credit. It's very important that you do that. Another way to help young people build credit is something which I did. I just learned this a few years back, is I put my son, who's now 24 years old, when he was in college, I put him as a co-signer on my car lease. So that helped to build his credit. And when he went to buy a car at 22 years old, when he graduated from college, they looked at his credit score. They were kind of amazed. He had an over 800 credit score as a 24-year-old, because I also got him a credit card that he used and we paid off. And now, at 24, he lives in Maryland. He's looking to buy his first home, looking to buy probably a townhouse or a condo, and he's already been pre-approved for a $350,000 mortgage loan. So, and to hop on what Reggie said, about there being a finite amount of land available. That's my grandmother used to say, that's the only thing God ain't making no more of is land. So yeah. So go ahead, love. I just wanted to get that in case I have to jump off because I have a meeting that have attended.
So James, just real quick. James, you mentioned something about credit, but if we're talking about young folks, they might not understand how credit works. So can you just, and excuse me, Laf, I'm just jumping in here, and then Antoinette asked a question, so we can get to that after that. So just can you just explain the basis of credit and how that works? So so if anybody sees this later, then they'll have just a basic understanding of it.
I'm not sure if I fully understand the question, but I'll give it a shot.
So the difference of $500 credit score and a 800 credit score.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so your credit score, and basically there are three organizations that monitor credit. And I think that's my appointment. But basically, that tells creditors what your ability to take on and repay debt. So the higher your credit score, the better. If you've got if you've got a $500 or $600 credit score, it's going to be hard for you to get credit. If you do, it will be at higher interest rates. And if you got a 700 or 800, you're probably pretty good. Again, depending upon what you're looking to do. I have to go answer my door though. I have someone at the door. So
all right,
if someone else can pick up. All right.
Sorry Lafayette, okay. Lafayette, can I read this question in the chat and answer it?
Oh yeah, sure.
All right. So Antoinette Jones says, home ownership is great, but owning a home does not seem to mean the same in many states. Some states permit home ownership, but the same owner does not own the land the home stands on. Is this value in home ownership is in this type of situation comparable to owning in states where homeowners own the land? Or should we not be concerned with this? What states separate home ownership from land ownership? So I'm just going to address that as a realtor, right? So generally, if you buy a home, which is what we're talking about, if you buy a home, you own the land. So what happens is they call it, you have the land, which is what you purchase, and then the improvement. The improvement is considered the house, right? So anything you put on the land is an improvement, right? So if you put a garage on there or whatever it is you put on there, a parking lot, or you pave it and let people park there, that's an improvement. So, but the only time you don't own the land and I'm kind of talking generalizations here. The only time you don't own the land is if you have a co-op. So if you have a co-op, you actually own just the structure that you have. So you own the walls and the floor, but you don't own the roof. You don't own the land around it. If you have a condo, that when you own a condo, you own the land that's underneath it and the roof and the walls. So the condo gives you a little more. So it depends on what type of thing you're buying, what you own. If you buy a house, you automatically own the land. The only time that's an exception is Hawaii that I know of, right? So Hawaii has different laws. We're not going to get into that unless somebody here has home ownership in Hawaii. Then we can talk about that. But yeah, so that's how Antoinette. Hopefully that answers your question.
I just want to add something to that, Reggie. It just makes me think about the situations where people have a business and they're renting the property, the building that they're running their business from. And they've been in business for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, established business, they're doing well, but they don't own the property. And then, the lease is up for renewal now, and then the owner says he wants, just an exorbitant amount of rent now, in an increase in the rent that you may not be able to afford. And oftentimes I've seen people in business actually have to move from an established location and sometimes even go out of business, because now to find the space that they're in the current times, it's just unaffordable. So whenever people say that they're going into business, I always suggest that you own, if you have goals and dreams and you're planning to be in business for a while, try to own where you set up shop, because I think, I don't know all of the details about, as a musician, I don't know all the details about Lennox Lounge, but it's a landmark. They shot movies in there. So many great musicians have performed there. And like I said, I don't know all the details, but it had something to do with the ownership of the place. He had been there for years, and I don't know why he didn't try to buy, own it, but he ended up going out of business, and I'm sure that same thing has happened a million times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can piggyback on that, Reggie Woods. I can think of two very famous clubs in New York where ownership came into play, and the club ceased to exist. And the first one was back in the 1990s. It was a club downtown called, oh man, where all the piano players used to play, all the really good piano players, Kenny Barron and all them people, Hank Jones, on University Place. Just south of 14th Street. Oh gosh. I'm drawing a blank on it, but it's very famous.
Are you talking about the jazz club over there?
Yeah, that was over there. They closed in the 1990s.
Yeah, I remember which one you're talking about. I can't think of the name of it either. Bradley's.
I know Knickerbockers.
Bradley's.
Okay, so Mr. Bradley did own the building, and he married one of the ladies that worked there, and after Mr. Bradley died, she kept the place running for some years, and then she decided to sell the business. She kept the building, but she sold the business. So boom, no more Bradleys. Whatever happened after that, I don't know. Lennox Lounge was a different situation. Here was a club that had been there since Billie Holiday's days. She died in 1959. And Mr. Reed and his wife bought the business, I want to say in the late 80s. And Mrs. Reed was the real owner. She was the businesswoman of the family. Mr. Reed was a policeman, and she had the business going. But that whole time that place was being rented. That space was being rented from someone who owned the building, and different owners of the building over the years. But Lennox Lounge was a like Reggie says, a landmark. Never got official landmark status, unfortunately, but it was a landmark. If you were in Harlem, meet me at the Lennox Lounge, or it's over there by the Lennox Lounge. When you get past the Lennox Lounge, etc. I would say that Mr. Reed was never a person who, after his wife passed, he continued the business. He wasn't a person that was into real estate. One of us said earlier that somebody, Reggie Wood said, oh, you bought your house for $10,000 20, 30, 40 years ago. Somebody offers you $1 million, it's $1 million, it's worth $1 million? I can't believe it, you know? Well, that was the case with Mr. Reed. The owner of the building, who was a brother about our age, offered to sell it to Mr. Reed, who's about our father's age, for $1 million in the year 2008, 9, something like that. To him, that was like an exorbitant amount of money. But to his son, he has a son named, same name, who's about our age, was like, Dad, that's the price. You've got to. But Mr. Reed was not hearing it. He couldn't understand that this building was worth $1 million. So he decided to not purchase it. So a few years went by, and the rent for the lease went up. The lease was finished, and when the owner wanted to do a new lease, he didn't really want Mr. Reed anymore, and so he doubled the price of the rent, and that was the beginning of the end. So understanding the value of owning, I would say that was key to the failure of that business, or the lack of the understanding of owning. Yeah. So.